Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Send in your questions and comments to dj@artistfirst.com. Now here they are, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. And yes, you are listening to The Soul of the Everyman. And I am Michael Lyons.
And I am Margaret.
And she is Margaret. And now that we've defined ourselves, we're going to take on another topic tonight. Defining God. Mm-hmm. And we're waiting for the lightning bolt in 1, 2. Just missed it. If I were asked to define God,
yes,
let's just jump right in.
Okay.
I would say not a chance. I'd say you got the wrong boy.
It's just that in the English language, when you say God, it means so many different things to so many people. You know, the definition probably is as unique as each individual person. So talking about God usually starts arguments because everyone is thinking of God a certain way.
A certain definition.
Right. So this is therefore the exercise of defining God.
Right. And, I mean, if you really start to break it down, I think people have defined God in a couple of different ways simultaneously, and you might certainly get the kind of standard definition of, well, he's the creator, he's the, or if you want to be less anthropomorphic, the spirit which created all things, that which existed before all things. We can call that generically God, and then you have your many, many, many different forms, and the 9,000 names of God is a good way to talk about how many particular definitions there are, and then there are kind of our everyday, or sort of run-of-the-mill definitions of God, because whatever we put in our lives that we, and I mean this as an individual sense, that we individually worship, is our God. And so those gods, and maybe we could write them with small g's or with other types of letters, those gods, well, those gods are every bit as real to people.
Yeah.
I think in some ways more real. And if you really get down to what somebody has made as their kind of personal God, whether that's money or prestige or you name it, that's your personal God. It could be your job. It could be, it could be very positively. It could be your personal God is the suffering other man. That's your God, that you will put yourself below and you will do everything you can to help. But those gods are also defined, and in many ways, as we define who our kind of local concept of what we will worship, that defines, it's more of a definition of self than it is a definition of God.
Mm-hmm. What I've observed is that a person's definition of God affects their life in so many ways, even if they are not conscious of it. Because if you believe in a God, you realize that there is some kind of perspective that's needed. And we are beings that need relation, and we think in terms of relationship. You can't, again, the exercise of just trying to give directions to another person, you've got to have a common point of reference.
Frame of reference, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so if you think of it that way, your frame of reference is your field of action. And that concept of God defines what is in that field of action for you, how you begin to interact with other people. If you are the only concern, how you feel, whether you like things or not, if everything reflects onto you, then at that point you are your own God.
And that's one I left out, but that's a great one. Is many people define God as what they see in the mirror. That's my God.
Pretty much. And they really are a little perturbed if there is any kind of suggestion or intimation that maybe their concept is not as broad as it should be.
Right. Not everybody is worshiping me. Gosh darn it.
So frustrating.
So frustrating. They're so wrong, too.
But that kind of concept or interaction is very basic. This is what little ones, children, do. These are frankly, what animals do. Everything is related to them and their needs. Not to say that they worship something, animals, but the concept, humans can grow into beginning to form the concept of God, something outside of myself, or how do I even say that? A relationship with something far greater than myself. And you've got to start at a personal level. Most people want, especially people who want to say that there is an impersonal God or a
spirit, energy, universe.
Just energy, or just there's it's not a being.
Well, most impersonal gods are exactly that. They don't care about you personally.
Well, but that's my point. How can you, as a personal being, because that is exactly who you are, actually have any concept of pure energy that is in some type of relationship with you?
Right.
Being in relationship with you means it's personal.
Right. And there's so many examples when people say, well, I don't believe in a personal God. I believe in the energy of the universe. And I believe, and this is almost the second statement all the time, I believe that my positive thoughts will bring positive energy to me. Well, if you have a truly impersonal God, none of your thoughts, positive, negative, in between, whatever, picking lint out of your belly button, none of those things matter. And so your idea of the impersonal God becomes somewhat contaminated with your own personal needs, wants, desires, what I consider good, what I consider not good, what I want, what I don't want.
And that's an excellent point. It's an excellent point. A transpersonal God who really just should have no response to you. Because there is no relationship to you. So why?
The completely impersonal God is indistinguishable from random chance, from heat.
The sun.
The sun. Well, literally, do mean just random chance. In other words, true impersonal gods can be said to exist only in concept, because once you put a person into the relationship, we can't relate to things which are impersonal. We have no relationship with Beta Caranis 2, It's a big ball of gas about 17 gazillion light years away. And you're like, I can conceive that, but, we just don't talk. And you can conceive an impersonal God, but you cannot, in the next breath, and they all do it in the next breath, and I believe my positive energy influence, and just stop right there, because you're making me crazy.
You can't have it both ways.
So actually, when we take that down, when we talk about people and their gods, it's always a personal God of some some level of personal God, because, and I think the most honest of them are that I am, I look in the mirror and I am my God, because then, you can say, well, yeah, you're crazy, but, at least you're, all there in your craziness, and you understand that the concept of defining that God, and in essence trying to put whatever it is that you want to call God in a box. Sometimes it's a very big box. sometimes it's a very tiny box. But you want to be able to hold it. And the reason you want to hold it is that you want to be able to wrap your arms around it in some way, shape, or form, and carry it around and say, this is my God. And you pull it out and say, look at the pictures.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to bring up the point that when they had done a study, one of the universities, and they had put electrodes on people's heads, and it was the monks, the Tibetan monks, as well as religious people who are in prayer. They go into prayer mode.
Mystics.
And what they discovered was there was an activity when it was a religious person, whether a nun or a priest. They discovered that the energy in the frontal lobe was active when they were in prayer and speaking with God. Okay? When the monks were speaking with God, the Tibetan monks were speaking with God, what they discovered was it was the very top of the head, which is equivalent to the 7th chakra for them. That was active. And both are valid. In the Tibetan teaching, the 6th chakra, which is the frontal, that's your third eye, which is the front of your brain, represents God in some form. 7th chakra, they say it's God without form and without name. Now, their description of it is sort of like an energy, but they never claimed that it's not a personal connection. That's the point I want to bring up. Because most people basically say, well, see, they're talking about a God that doesn't have a name, and they're doing this connection. It's like, no, you have to understand. They understand that they're in relationship with this, and it means that it's very personal.
Well, and to digress there for just a second, I believe the idea of a Buddhist to reach enlightenment is to reach the point where they become one with the nameless God, and in essence embody and become God. And so it's a desperately personal relationship, because it's a relationship which is supposed to take you from the base, which is the most animalistic, the lowest forms of life, all the way to the highest form of life, which is nameless life. It's God in all things. It's the universe God. But it's always that fountain, or that energy flow from top to bottom. It is not a discontinuous, now we're going to get to the nameless God, and every other time we were doing something else. No, it's all the way up to that God and all the way back down from that God. It's that constant cycle. And so that's a great point, because in essence, the personification of God is part of the definition of God. And when you go through all of the various religions throughout the world, people have always anthropomorphized God. God is a man, God is a woman, God is a tree, God is a bull, God is a goat, whatever. Anthropomorphizing or embodying God, sometimes it's with a lot of different mythological or a lot of different animalistic or spirit-based religions. It's a form of a tree, of a rock, of an animal that has great power, like an eagle or a bear or something, where you are looking at the power of a piece of something that represents the power beyond yourself, and that power is the ability to fly, the ability to have a tremendous strength, the ability to live what seems like forever with a tree, those kinds of things.
And yes, that in American Indian culture, it is the totems. The energy totems are the animals or the insects, the beings that are here. Now, most people they take it and say, oh, that's a totem energy. Well, they don't the understanding is not always there. They think it's like, okay, well, this is my representation of the animal that, I like, and that expresses me in some way.
The cutest animal.
Usually, or the strongest or the most powerful.
Right.
But the point is, totem animals were always used in terms of almost like a energetic tool for the human to understand that if you are brother with
Eagle.
If you are brother with Eagle, and he lends you his ability to fly, strength, Eagle is the one who flies the highest and is able to bring messages of great spirit.
Right.
And bring your requests up or how you wish to communicate, and he can bring it back down. So it is an energetic form, almost like an energetic tool by which you bring yourself along. You don't worship these things because they are part of creation with you. Your body is very intimately connected with all of creation down here. And human is very unique in the fact that it can hone in on different totem energies or types of energies to be able to utilize it. Other forms cannot do this.
Right.
Okay? It's almost like this is your toolbox by which you are able to take steps into the life that's been presented to you.
Right. You're trying to become bear, or become eagle. But eagle and bear and the other totems, the other spirit energies, are where you can touch in. Like you say, use that as your vehicle to extend yourself into that energy and then reach what that energy can reach. But then you come back. Spirit journeys, if we stay with the Native American or any of these animistic religions, they're all about relating the human to the spirit, to the great spirit, through these various energies. So you're not trying to worship the river or the water or the tree or the corn or the bear no, you're trying to say, I am one with this water. This water is a part of me. It defines the way I relate to the great spirit through water. That I am one with the eagle. The eagle defines me. It defines the way I relate to the great spirit through eagle. And so to gather all the totems and be able to use each one of them is kind of the way the Buddhists end up gathering all the different forms of life, being able to become one with all of them and get to the enlightenment at the end.
And the task is through your own evolution, you are able to bring along all these forms with you.
Right.
That is the task of human. We were created to tend the incredible divine garden of God. And how do you tend to it? Is by bringing them all along.
And then, when if you talk about the definitions of God, which are more of the Middle Eastern religions and many of the Far Eastern religions even, where God becomes personified in powerful beings. And you can then start to see that the human being is and you see this right in Genesis, God creates man in his own image. Well, then what you're basically saying is not that we are some sort of weak copy of God, but that, in essence, we are a part of God made manifest in the world and to act, in essence, as a part of God in our most perfect form, and be in the world and still have that connection back to the greater, to the whole. And that definition of God puts man and his connection first, at the top, if you will, of this relationship back to spirit. But it always defines the God in the terms of the man, or in the terms of the woman, if you want to. But we're talking about just people. The God that we see is a God which is a perfect, or a fully represented person, a person which can love selflessly, love without conditions, a person which has no desire to do anything wrong. So that perfect person is the elevated person down here, the person that can't do any of those things, that is limited, that can't see, that can't, is trying to get to the perfect person but can't. And that relationship is also extremely valid. That personal God that we talk to and ask for forgiveness, that we ask for his blessings, for his mercies, and all these other things that we ask God for, that definition of God is a way of elevating ourselves as well.
It's a connection to your heart, because your heart will tell you when something is right and something is wrong. So, and you know it internally. So when you've done something and suddenly you feel guilty about it, you realize that there must be a way to deal with this, to get me back to that clear heart state that I was in originally. And just that action alone basically allows you a doorway into your soul. You realize, wait a minute, I am more than the action that I just did. And I realize that there's something more to my perceptions going on. Like, where did this guilt come from? How is it that I know that this was bad? And how do I know that this is good? It's not just the mental exercise, okay, this is good, this is bad, and this is how I feel at this particular time, because I like this, I don't like that. The internal heart state tells you what is truly good and what is not. Your mind will qualify. Well, this is the pros list and this is the cons list. Let me just start making my list up of, well, this is good and this is nice and this wasn't pleasant and I didn't like that.
Well, and that's, now we're touching on the subject of morality, and people's definitions of God do often get bound right up with morality and whether things are good or bad.
But that was my point. It's just people have a tendency to want to bind up a lot of reactions that they may be having instead of being able to say, okay, wait a minute. Let me breathe here. What is actually going on? What am I feeling? What is unfolding before my eyes? And where can I get my heart peace back?
Exactly. And like I said, those actions that we take to sort of reconcile ourselves, if we feel, when you do feel that you're out of touch with whatever your definition of God is, you want to reconcile yourself, whether that is an act which has put you farther away from that God and that you want to come back farther away from what you consider your true self, which is yourself in relationship to God. And even in the animistic religions, you would oftentimes have the idea that you had wronged something. You had wronged spirit. You had done an action which had desecrated a certain area or made yourself unclean. And so the idea of becoming back in tune with your totem to cleanse yourself, going on a spirit journey, was also part of that. That whole idea of the definition of God, in essence, being the way in which we understand what we're trying to become, the ways that we are trying to become more like God, and also then throw the morality part in, which is that anything that pushes me farther away from that is bad, and anything that moves me closer to it is good. And then it comes into millions and millions of little distinctions, and you can put the mental on top of it, and you start weighing things out. I was only 3 4/4 bad today, so I only need 1/4 and 3 seconds better tomorrow, and I'll be okay. I'll be balanced out. I'm going to eat one tiny bit of the chocolate bar, and then I'm going to put it away.
Qualifications.
Yes.
Actually, I thought that was the definition of hell, by the way.
That is the definition of hell. And the other good definition of hell is the one where you say, hell is the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we might do is take that and say our intention now is to go back to the studio for a little break. And then on the upside, the second half hour, we'll talk more about how we define our gods.
Taking God on Patrol is a first-person account of the world of law enforcement from the perspective of a Christian police officer in the 4th largest city in America. From speeding car chases to the crossing of the thin blue line, author Mark S. Cariner seeks to find God's biblical truth in a behind-the-scenes look at law enforcement. And check out Mark's newest book, The Tactical Heart. Both are available at Amazon.com.
Hi, this is Pamela Foland. Check out my new book, Megan the Pet Whisperer, available at Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. Please visit my website, www.PamelaFoland.com. You're listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Hi, my name is Christina Garlick, and my new book, Nevada Rain, is now available. It's a sci-fi fantasy story for ages 14 and up. I hope you check it out, and of course enjoy. Also, you're listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network that has a station for everyone.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
You are listening to The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can listen to them anytime visit ArtistFirst.com. Now back to your hosts, Margaret and Michael Lyons.
Oh, and thank you very much, Everyman. Yes, you are listening to The Soul of the Everyman. Welcome back to the second half hour. And we are in a discussion about defining God.
That's right. So anybody who wants to duck and cover. We haven't been, this is tempting fate, but we have not yet been, stop. It hasn't, nothing, all the good things have happened. I would say that the first half hour, what we basically tried to do was talk about how people, how we as people, almost, have a need to put God in a box. And
yes.
putting God in a box is very convenient. When you define God, you get to put him in a box. And then the other nice thing about having God in a box is you can use him like, kind of a surprise. Hey, watch out! God in a box. When you need him, it's like like super duper Tic Tacs. You take them out and say, I got to take another shot of God in the box, and then I'm good for a while. So the thing about God, and I'll just put this out there. You can disagree with it as you like, but the thing about God is that if you truly say to yourself, whether it's an impersonal or personal God, that this is something which we believe has, let's say, always existed. Even if we just say, well, it's only, the universe has only been around for 14 point whatever bazillion years. Okay, so maybe he's only been around since the beginning. Okay. That is a freaking long time. We, and we just take our whole existence of the planet, is still only a small fraction of that time. And if you take the existence of us, people on this planet, it's just inconceivably short amount of time. So just from that point of view, we have to put God in a box because there's just no other way. We ourselves are in a box. It's 100 years of being on the planet. And then you get to come back again or whatever, but it's still, even if you were coming back since like Homo sapien 1 up till now, and you came back every time and you went, you still wouldn't have enough time to have a big enough box to keep all of God in. So that box we put God in, that small little box we put God in, is really a definition of us. It's how much of us we feel we can encapsulate, or how much of God we can encapsulate within us.
How much of us can we take?
How much of us can we say, I'll use this little piece of me to keep a bit of God? And the thing is, that's it. I mean, you if you're Mother Teresa, maybe you've got like your whole spleen dedicated to God. Mother Teresa, maybe she has her spleen and part of her liver. But most of us have like our left fingernail on our hand, just a tip dedicated to God, or maybe even less. So that little box that we keep God in is unfortunately small because I'll just say me, I am unfortunately small. I can't keep enough God in me because I'm just not big enough. And, to the extent that we can define God, and that we can have our little box where we keep God, we have to use that portion that we can understand and use it as best as we can to try and relate ourselves to the infinite.
Mm-hmm. That's true. But if you think of it in terms of just this body, this consciousness being the touch point of who you are as a being in this plane of existence. It's just like you reach out and you touch the top of a desk. That touch point is your fingerprint because it's only the tip of your finger.
Right.
That's who we are in the non-God mode. Just this imprint. It's not even the finger.
We're just little oily smudges on the planet.
That's pretty much it. Mm-hmm.
Some of us are bigger oily smudges than others.
And we all have our very unique and distinct pattern.
And smell.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a great, that is a wonderful, wonderful analogy, because it also brings to mind like flatland, right?
Mm-hmm.
If anyone is unfamiliar with the concept, you can think of the concept of flatland as if you were able to take a piece of paper and lay it on that desk and say that you are this vast, vast being. Just let's make ourselves a vast being. But the part of you that everyone else can see is only the part of you that can touch the paper. And you can't just wrap yourself in the paper. You get to touch one part of you to the paper. So you see, just a fingertip, just a fingerprint. Or maybe if you're laying down another part of you, you're going to see, a cross section of a knuckle or something. But you don't get very much contact with that paper. And that tiny little itty bitty contact point is the part that people see down here.
All the paper represents a world of existence.
Exactly.
Where people are, the beings there are two-dimensional. They can only see length and width. There's no height, no depth.
Right.
So to interact with them means that it's only a two-dimensional slice of who you are.
Right.
And you're so much more. So much more. But when in the book itself, the person that's trying to interact with the beings in that two-dimensional space, we're freaking them out because that cross-section of what they can see kept changing form. Kind of like when you see when they do CAT scans and they're building a representation on the screen of the person's face, let's say. And you have to do all that topological comparison, but they're doing slices.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what a two-dimensional being would see if they lived only in that two-dimensional space. So if you think of yourself as that we are living in this limited space, but there's being out there that is so much more.
Yeah. And that's another way of defining God, and you could say that God is all of us, and by all of us I mean every manifestation of everything in the universe that's been manifested in a limited space. Even if we could say the universe is infinite, but if it's truly just a three-dimensional or four-dimensional space, and you have to postulate that God is outside that, the universal thing is outside of it, because then you say, well, that everything in here is just a cross-section of something which is beyond infinity. Again, you start thinking about these concepts, and you say to yourself, well, and I'm the tiny little dot, on this tiny little dot of this tiny little galaxy, which is fine. And you say, why would the thing that is all those things care about any one little piece of the existence in this dimension? What again, that's the whole idea of the personal relationship of God. And it may be, and you could say, well, maybe whatever it is doesn't care at that level, but the part that is manifested wants to rejoin with the whole, wants to be part of that God, understand where it came from. And that definition of God, the seeking of the relationship, because we, and by we I mean everything, is one with or part of that thing that existed before. And now we're at the 2-drink minimum of the show, so you should probably, every time I say infinite, just take another drink. It should be fine. By the end of this show, we'll be good. Now, I mean, these are the types of things which are difficult to talk about in a sense, because they're difficult to think about. The Flatland was a mental exercise of saying, well, what would happen if a 3D person got into a 2D world? Well, if you start to think about what would happen if somebody beyond the fourth dimension got into a 4-dimensional space, that's kind of what we are.
Mm-hmm.
We're the odd reflection or the odd cross-section of something which is far beyond our ability to even conceptualize.
Mm-hmm. And the concept of understanding that you as a being, there's a yearning that rises up inside of you that wants to know. It just wants to know, where did I come from? I'm obviously more than just this interaction I'm having right now. What is going on? I want to know. That search lights up in you, and it's a marvelous thing. Because then you begin to explore.
Right.
As children, we call it play, but that's what they do to really begin to explore the world around them, like the little birdie that's singing. Oh my!
Not sound effects, folks. It's a really little bird outside. Go right ahead.
But to understand that that's a core aspect of who you are. Yearning for relationship. And
understanding.
And understanding.
And that's a good definition of God. Is we could define God as that part of us, and by that I mean all of us, that yearns for a relationship with where we came from. To understand.
I believe Campbell's term is the traditional search for the father or the mother. This is the search for the parent.
For the origin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, in many ways, you can look at all human endeavor, which is relating ourselves to the greater, is a search for origins. Your spirit journey is a journey from a smaller self to a larger self. Your relationship, if you're an animistic religion, your relationship to the various spirit animals, is a way of extending yourself back towards your origin. When we talk about in Christian religions or in Judeo-Christian religions or in any of the Western, you're talking about the relationship of, or rather the understanding of how we come from this space, this man-centered, earth-centered space, and transition ourselves through, and if you talk about through Christ into the greater, or through the Buddha into the greater, into enlightenment, it's all transitioning from an understanding that we are here, but we think, or we're trying to understand how we got here from there. And we don't understand there too much.
Well, if you just go to the basic concept of what keeps this universe together, what they term of, what was it now, is like 23% is accounted for of the matter and the energy that they can count, and the other 70,
80%.
77% is unseen matter and unseen energy, or they call it dark matter or dark energy.
Right.
So if you think of it in terms of what we were talking about with Flatland, okay, I personally think that percentage is much greater.
Right.
But if you think of Flatland and the fact that this three-dimensional being was interacting with that two-dimensional space, and the only thing that could make contact was that little bit of fingerprint. It's a very similar unfolding.
Right. And from the point of view of those folks who are in the Flatland, the concept of anything beyond the space that they knew, which was this two-dimensional space, was the same idea that we have here of anything to do with dark matter or dark energy. Because what do we say? Well, you can't interact with it, you can't touch with it, you can't. Nothing we do, it's passing through you all the time. It's like you're like a ghost in this.
And that Flatland is supported.
Yes.
By this greater. It exists within it, but it can't perceive it.
So if you want to take a page out of current cosmology and say, well, the 80% of the universe that we cannot ever contact is the part which we could say is God. We could define God as dark matter. We could define God as dark energy. We don't know that that's the truth, and it may be that God is even outside of all that. But that's another box. That's another way to define God.
It's another rung on the ladder of trying to understand and expand our consciousness, because we understand that we are limited down here. And to begin to handle concepts in more than just this logical sequence. You have to begin to conceive of thinking holographically through time.
Oh, yeah. Time's the worst part of it. If we could digress, and maybe we'll have a show about time, and then we'll run out of time. It'll be awesome. So I don't know where this stuff comes from, really. But we talk about if we kind of drop ourselves a little bit back towards our topic. So we as beings in this world have a need to understand why, how we get here, what our origin was. We also have a need to encapsulate some part of that within ourselves and call it God, to define what we call our God. And I think that those needs are very, very human needs, very, very essential needs. Even and we've both met folks who say, "Oh, I don't believe in God. I don't think there's a personal God. I don't think of anything. I think God is energy. I think all." But no one of them can define God without relating it to the personal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a futile exercise to say that you would like to define God as impersonal or define God as not even existing, and yet do it without relating it in some way to the thing that you are, which is a person.
A creation.
A creation, or even if you don't believe in a creation, it's certainly that you can say that as a being, I can't in any way relate myself to another being or to God in an impersonal way. Our relationships are always personal. Our concept of God, our definition of God, is always in some way personal. It's not to say that the personal God is God, but it is the part of God that you defined and that you want to hang on to. And so in that...
It's the part of God that you interact with.
Yes.
If you understand that being a human being must be in relationship. And that is the only way you're going to interact with God. The impersonal concept of energy still becomes personal because you're still there.
Yeah. The only impersonal definition of God is one where you take yourself out of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets to be sort of a
then you can't communicate anything at that point. It is past all concept then.
Very, very nihilist.
Well, you can go the other way too. It's just not human.
Or not human. So I think that from that point of view, we could also say that everybody's definition of God, if it works for you, is okay. In other words, there's no point in trying to say, well, my definition of God is better than your definition of God.
No, that's not what this life is about. We're not here to prove who's better than whom. We're here to learn how to truly love.
Yes.
And loving is that heart expression that has a level of purity to it that doesn't matter what the form or the name is the love. Love is. It is unconditional.
And that's maybe the best definition of God, which is, and many people say, well, God is love. And then you pin them down, you say, well, what's love then? And then they're like, man, you're never happy. But what is love? I know, we're not going to sing. But the point being is that the definition of God as being love, and as being, in essence, love, which is, as you mentioned, unconditional, which is also beyond human. It's a transhuman love, because we, no matter how good you are, how good, and the saints and every one from Mother Teresa on down, there's no one who does not have some conditions on love. We try our best, but there's always conditions on love. And we say to ourselves that God, our definition of God is love, God is unconditional love. The love that we are trying to attain, or the ability to love that we're trying to attain, and that relationship, that's a great definition. And I think when you start to define God that way, God is love, God is unconditional love, that definition is really works for a lot of people. Trying to attain the ability to love all people unconditionally is very Buddhist. It's also very Christ-like.
It's Christ.
Well, at the level of seeing God in every man, in every person, that's Christ-like. It's also can be seen as the way the Buddha, and the way we can interact with each other at the very high level, maybe not the highest level, but very high level. It's to try and always see God in the other person, and try to always love that other person unconditionally.
Right. But when you understand that you are limited as human, okay?
Absolutely.
All the trying in the world is not going to bring you to that point, okay? It is a transformation of the heart that allows you to let go of your need to control, all right? Because when you let go of the need to control, that is the only time that love can enter in unconditionally.
Right. I mean, conditions are control.
Right. Exactly that. So if you can allow yourself to come to that point, you understand firstly that you are human, and human has nothing but conditions. So your only recourse to learn about love is to allow your heart to open and ask the divine, ask God, fill me, Lord, with a peace beyond all understanding, because this situation has no peace for me. People are at me from every which way, and I don't want my heart to be disturbed. I need peace in my heart. Please fill me. Help me to learn how to love unconditionally like you. How can you love the unlovable? That was always my question. How do you love the unlovable? I can't do it in my own strength. I just can't. Sorry, folks, I have my own opinions.
Right.
But what I have found is that His grace allows for a love to come in that I don't understand.
And that's another great definition of God, is the love that we get from Him is we can't comprehend it. And if we can embody it and then kind of shine it outward, it's the great, another great definition is grace. When you receive that grace, what you're just talking about is receiving grace, and then are able to give that grace to the extent that you can do that, is to the extent that you're coming closer to that ideal.
And it's one of those where you have to give permission.
Yeah.
Because you, under your own, you're going to try to force yourself to like somebody that you don't like. Have you ever tried that? I mean, that's miserable. It really is. I have tried that. I have tried really hard to like people under my own steam that it's like, oh, you are just...
A challenge.
Yes. Well, what I've found is that when I open my heart up and I ask, please, Lord, you put this person in front of me. I don't know what to do with that. Just guide me, please. Because, I know I have my opinions, but I know that there are steps that need to be taken.
And exactly that. And I think one of the best things to do in that situation is to receive the revelation that we are all unlovable.
Oh, yes. This is true.
When we try to say love the unlovable, you really have to look at yourself. A good definition of the way God loves, God interacts with us is God is love and God is unconditional love, and God loves us all despite the fact that we are all pains in the ass. We are all unlovable.
Sure.
And when you say, well, I can't love that person, well, you have to look and say, well, you know what? Why should anyone love me? I'm not lovable. But yet we find that thing that we defined as God, we also define as loving us regardless.
Yes.
And that taking that into your little box and saying, I'm going to try to love regardless today and fail over and over again, but keep trying to love regardless, is a good definition of God.
Well, you may try, but we thank you for listening, because we have apparently come to the end of our hour.
Thank you for loving us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for loving us.
And I'm Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
I love you.
Have a good one, people.